buyer's agent, right? Like, I know that they are like my people, my bread and butter. I got my systems down, like, I love them. I feel super confident working with them. And so as I switch kind of mindsets a little bit into more of a listing agent, Ariel, probably where you kind of are, like that half up, half down situation, I'm starting to kind of reevaluate some processes, and through that, I've realized I'm not maximizing my team and how I've been using them, and I'm now working on that, and so I'm kind of in like this growth stage, I guess. And so I kind of want to let you guys know where I am. I am on a team. I'm on the Rogers Lawn team. I'm biased. I think my team is the absolute best team in the world. We have the best leaders, the best transaction coordinators. Everyone's amazing, and I'm very grateful to have them. So. Recently, I had a past client, they were buyers of mine, probably like 1 or 2 years ago, good friends, and they called me and they said, hey Maura, we're thinking about maybe selling. Is that something you can help us with? Like, do you work with sellers? And I was like, oh my God, that is like the worst thing you can possibly hear as a realtor, right? Like, I was saying a few choice words, and in that moment I had like a moment of reflection where I was like, shoot, I really need to like evaluate my business and what I'm doing and how I'm communicating with people. And so now I'm mindset shift and really focusing on listings, which my team is really helping me doing. So that's kind of like the overarching message that I want to convey to you guys, whether you are a team member, you're a new agent, maybe you're not on a team, or maybe you're a team leader. Like, how can you help people that maybe don't feel like a listing agent to become a listing agent? And then same thing, if you're a teammate, how can you help bring your teammates up, okay? So utilize your team. Justin, can you stand up for me? Guys, can we do Justin a round of applause?
Yeah, Justin!
Okay, if you don't know Justin, you should get to know Justin. We used to say that all the time in the story. Like, if you don't know this girl, you should get to know this girl. So that's how I feel about Justin. Everyone should know Justin. He's amazing, and so Justin handles a lot of stuff, especially in regards to our listing. So he handles pictures, getting open houses schedules, getting all the listing documents sent out, getting them all set up, answering questions from sellers. He does a ton for our team, especially in regards to listings. Dawn is not here today, but she is our like marketing coordinator, and she helps kind of get everything prepped, make sure all of our links are set out, they're on social media, and things like that. And she'll also help with like mailers or some creative stuff. And then Kevin, can you guys stand up? Okay, you guys, give Kevin a round of applause. Caitlin's not here, but she's another one of our team leads. And so ultimately, I really rely on our team leaders for a couple of things. One is going to be pricing. We'll talk about pricing in a little bit, but I very much run all of my numbers with a team leader before I present them to a seller. Initial appointments, a lot of times I bring a team leader to my initial appointments with me. So it's rare that I don't have Ben, Justin, or Kevin, or Caitlin with me at a listing appointment. Obviously, throughout the transactions, as you hit hurdles, they're there to kind of coach you through the conversations and things like that. And then shadowing. I think that this is something like I know I've gotten away from, especially in the last like couple of years. I know my first year, like for reference, Kevin, for those of you who don't know, is my older brother. So when I started in the business, Kevin like trained me. Like, I was at his hip for like a year solid. Like, he probably wanted to slit my throat on a daily basis. But the importance of shadowing, I realized, is what made shadowing him as like a really great buyer's agent is what made me a really great buyer's agent. And so as I kind of reimagining what I look like on the listing side, I'm really trying to shadow more listing opportunities, talk through listings. Like Hayden, you guys, Hayden's like a sleeper cell. He gets so many listings, and like hearing about what he does and how he does it is so informative to me on so really utilizing the team in regards to shadowing opportunities. And again, something I also need to continue to get better at. Okay, so I'm going to kind of break this down into my processes, but wanted to kind of give you guys some, I guess, prospecting. Like I said, like I'm working on this. So of my last 5 listings or upcoming listings, I've had 2 divorce situations, a death in the family, so he needed to downsize, an estate, and a flipper. Okay, so kind of a variety of people. Like I'll tell you, on the buying side, I work with a ton of first-time home buyers. Like if I had to pull up a spreadsheet, I probably have 80% first-time home buyers. On the selling side, it looks a little bit different, right? And so I don't necessarily have a great system when it comes to prospecting. Like they're kind of just coming in from all over the place. I will say my networking group's been really helpful with that. Hey Ben, can you hit the computer for me?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Thanks. No, you're good. Okay, so when I get a lead, the first thing I do is text them and say, hey, can we just go ahead and set up an initial phone call? 10, 15 minutes. in that 10-15 minutes, I'm asking them questions. So I'm like a big personality person. Like I try to read the room, pick up on like subtle little hints, tones and voices, things like that. And so when I'm calling, I kind of break this out into two things. First, it's like a little bit of small talk, right? I kind of call it like your warm fuzzies or like your prickly feelings, like what are their pain points and things like that. And so I usually just start the conversation like, hey, what's going on? Like, why do you guys want to move? And then they go into divorce, death, whatever. Knowing that, I can kind of judge the rest of the conversation on if I need to adjust my emotion, if I am gonna be very technical. And so a couple of the questions I ask on the technical side are, I always confirm tax records. So I ask them like, hey, tell me about your house. 4 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. Great, hey, on your tax record it shows, whatever, 2,000 square feet. Is that still accurate? They say yes, no, or we're not sure. So I try to confirm everything from the tax record so I have a good baseline to run my comps off of. I always ask if there are any major updates since you bought it. How much do you owe on the house so I can run 9424. So I can run numbers for them. And then I always ask them too, like, how much do you think your house is worth? And knowing that too, it kind of sets expectations. Sometimes they say, I have no idea. Usually they're pretty spot on. And so maybe it's confirming that, and maybe it's getting into the house and realizing, oh my gosh, you think your house is worth $900,000 and it's worth like $250,000, right? So kind of setting and managing those expectations on the front end. And then warm fuzzies. So I always kind of ask, like, what's the situation? Try to be very authentic with them. Like, and for these situations, death, divorce, and an estate. The estate, they just want to know the numbers, and I'm dealing with lawyers, right? Divorce, all right, depends on what the situation is, and I can quickly tell who's on which side, if it's friendly, if it's not friendly, and can kind of adjust from there. And then death in the family, right? You have to go with that at like a little bit more of an empathetic tone. And so I try to be very authentic with my clients and just, you know, be very genuine. I think at the end of the day, like, you're selling yourself, and the best way to sell yourself is to be yourself. And then I always ask you, like, what's your goal, right? Do you want to get the most amount of money for the house? If it's a divorce situation and you don't want to deal with negotiations, like, it's important to kind of understand what are their priorities. Get it done as quickly as possible, maximize ROI, all that kind of stuff. So then, once we have that initial phone call and I can kind of get a vibe of where we are, I like to run prep. So like I said, I always run comps with typically Benjamin, and when I do this, I always run them myself first, and then I run them with Ken, or I'll run them with Kevin. And when I do that, it's really interesting to always see like how everyone runs them, because think about it, if I'm on a listing appointment, they're my competitors, right? So how are they doing this? And it's really interesting to kind of test yourself, I guess, in that way. And then I always practice too, like if they gave me an objection on the phone, like I practice how to handle it in person, knowing that that's probably gonna come up. So things like that. When it comes to prep, this is typically what I prep. And Ben, can you just kind of like scroll down through this? So tax records, and this was for a divorce situation, so I presented it to the husband, or to the wife. Husband was out of town, so I PDF'd this entire thing, sent it to him, and went over it with him on the phone. So I always do I highlight kind of the key stats. You can keep scrolling. You can just kind of roll through this. This is their old listing, so we always print that out and include that. This was new construction, so there wasn't like a ton of detail on it. And then I typically will run 1 to 2 CMAs, and when I do this, I try to break this down, and usually like if it's in a subdivision, I'll do it by subdivision. If it's like elementary school districts, those are kind of like usually the two where I start. And then I always start when I'm running comps, like where are we in the neighborhood? Like has their next door neighbor sold? Has the people across the street sold? Kind of like what Becky was saying the other day, like is there a comp that you really want me to look at or something you're curious about? That was a great question. I'm definitely gonna be asking that. But anyway, kind of cast a wide net, and then the second search, it kind of breaks it down, okay? So then I label these CMA1 and CMA2 so they can see how the criteria is broken out. I typically kind of give like highlights on CMA1, and then CMA2 is where I say, okay, this is where we're really gonna get the numbers. And this one had a basement, so it was a little bit more delicate, so I just ran an additional CMA2, but ultimately it was gonna improve a point, because I knew one of their objections was gonna be above ground square footage and below ground square footage, and why we didn't compare to a true 3,000 square foot above ground square footage house. So that's why I like pulled those numbers. And then CMA2, again, I kind of just highlight things. If there's houses that are pending, I always try to call the listing agents and figure out what they're sold for, so I can give that info. And again, it just makes you look good because you did the due diligence on the front end, so it helps. Okay, so after I kind of roll through the CMAs, you can just like hit these, but typically I'll highlight sold dates, list price, concessions, what type of financing it was, bedrooms, bathrooms, and then I always kind of just go through the remarks and highlight some of the things that I think are important and things that I think that buyers are going to think are important. And then print out all the pictures, and usually include like my top 3 favorite listings so they can see these. And then sometimes I'll put like little notes at the top, like my favorite, whatever, in comparison to stats, in comparison to like what the house looks like, things like that. All the way to the bottom, please. Thank you. This was just average sales price year over year. This is one thing that I always pull from Kevin. Kevin is like the king of using this graph, and I love it. And ultimately it has the sales price and then the number of sales. And this was in Magnolia Green, so it was a pretty easy set of comps to run. But basically for that second CMA or first CMA, whatever, try to run some stats so they can see, especially if it's at like the beginning or the end of the year.
Hey Maura, just a quick comment on this. When you do something like Magnolia Green, you gotta be really specific in citing resale. Something that still has new construction if you're doing a year-over-year graph like this. You see how it says resale down here? You still have new construction there, so you gotta make sure you're careful with that.
And again, you can see like on this one I did above ground. This probably got a little out of order. You can keep scrolling. And then the last thing that's going to be on here is going to be proceeds. So I usually try to give 3 scenarios, and one thing I did not mention is when I am on the initial phone call, I always ask clients, hey, do you have like pictures of your house or videos that you would send me? And most always they're like, yeah, absolutely, happy to do that. I'm like, great. And so then I also am going into this knowing, all right, unless there's like a crazy smell or whatever, something like that, then I have a pretty good idea of what the house is gonna look like. So knowing that, I always kind of do like my middle estimate of proceeds as what I think we're probably gonna end up listing the house for. Bottom is like worst case, and then the second one is kind of best case. And then listing docs, Justin fills these out, sends them to me, and we include this in our listing presentation. Okay? Do you guys have any questions on that? Cool.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How often during your listing presentations do you actually have to go through every single CMA and comp, or do you feel that you walk in?
I always try to ask people, and that leads nicely into my next segment, so thank you, Ben. But when you get to the actual appointment, I always ask when I sit down at the table, all right, guys, shoot me straight. How much do you want to know? Like a little or a lot? And almost all the time, they're like, give us all the details. Like, this is like a huge investment for them, and so they want to know. Now, do I give them all the details? No. I go over my 3 favorites still, but they're still like, wow, all the stats and everything makes you look so prepared, and a lot of agents don't do this kind of stuff. So, especially in competitive appointments, like I always ask that because sometimes they just don't care. They just want to know the bottom line. So, sometimes I go over it, but usually I just quick highlights. Okay, appointment. I don't know about you guys, I did not grow up in a house where we ever took off shoes, so that was one thing that I did make a note of. And this is so gross, but something that I do always tell people, especially new agents, it's summertime, so you're not wearing socks with your shoes. So if you go into a listing appointment and you know that you're gonna offer to take off your shoes, make sure you wear appropriate shoes that don't make your feet smell terrible. Like, seriously, think about it. Like, if you're wearing leather shoes all day and your feet smell terrible and then you walk in your house, I always ask, oh, do you want me to take off my shoes? Some houses are very like, wow, thank you so much for being respectful. And other houses are like, no, absolutely not, keep them on. I'm like, great. But plan accordingly. Lesson learned, plan accordingly. I always ask them first thing, when we get into the house, hey, take me on a tour, right? And I'm always looking for like personal things. I'm trying to pick up on the kids' favorite sport teams, stuff like that, like little things to make conversation with. And then if Justin's with me, or if I'm shadowing, like Kevin and I run a lot of appointments together, and it's honestly like my favorite. And it's when I feel like the strongest listing agent is when I'm with Kevin, and I think it's just because our styles are pretty similar. But when Kevin's running an appointment, I'll go with him, and especially if it's like a family friend or someone we both know both of us, and I'm like around him, and I'm taking pictures the whole time, and I'm making notes, and so at the end of the day, like he's ready to rock and roll and can put together a quick PFB, and then vice versa. If Justin's with me, he's taking pictures or videos, and we always ask, do you mind if we take pictures, just to be polite and things like that. Always they're like, yeah, absolutely.
What's PFB?
Great question. I'm gonna get to it.
Okay.
I'm gonna get to it.
It's the best thing that ever happened to listing agents.
Yeah, and you, yes, the best thing, and it's great for the sellers. So anyway, take note tour, we take notes. At the end of the time, we sit down at the table, go over this stuff, again, kind of in as little or as much detail as they want. And then, I really try to ask questions and read the room. Like, I think that that's kind of one of my superpowers is I'm typically pretty good at matching people's energies. Like sometimes if they're like really over the top, then you know, I'm really over the top naturally. So we can match them that way, but if they're sad about their wife who just passed away and how they need to downsize, I'm bringing it down a little bit, you know, offering a little bit more sympathy and things like that. So really kind of playing on the emotions. And then when I leave the appointment, setting expectations. So what are the next steps? And then that kind of leads me to follow-up. Ben, can you pull up the PFB tab, please? Actually, Ben, you can actually go back to that listing appointment worksheet. So this is one thing that we've created that really helps. So when we're, again, in this appointment, this is what I'm filling out. If you can scroll to the top, Ben. Thank you. I always kind of write positives, potential objections, and suggestions, timing. So like, as we're going through the house, I'm making notes of everything that I see that's wrong, that a buyer's gonna notice, or if I'm the buyer, I'm gonna point out to them. And this is really helpful because it's already kind of categorized into my next process. So Ben, can you scroll down again? Thank you. Again, contacts needed if we're going through a house and there's like a dip in the floor, we're like, hey, get a crawl space guy out here. And then also trying to remember ages of things. And again, I'll say like why this is so important down the road. All right, Ben, taking the PFB, please. All right, so that kind of set the stage for the PFB. So within 24 hours after the appointment, I always try to put together what we call a PFB, which means preparing for battle. So I always send this document to the clients, and in this, it has very generic, like introductory paragraph, an overview of everything that this document's gonna talk about. So strategy and timing, pricing, positives, objections, and suggestions. Next page, thank you. All right, so this is kind of strategy and timing, and ultimately, this is made to keep me in line just as much to keep them in line. So I don't know about you guys, I will leave an appointment and like, I forget what I did or what I had for breakfast that morning. And so when you're calling me a week later and you're like, what did we say? I'm like, shoot, I don't remember. So this document is made to keep me on track just as much as it is to keep the sellers on track, okay? So when I go through this, I put together a proposed timeline. So again, this is kind of broken out into how I envision the process going and what we talked about based on like their goals. So like, for example, this was for a divorce situation, and it also helps keep everyone on the same page, which is really nice. And it's kind of like a little checklist for them. So basically they had 2 weeks that they were gonna get the house ready for the market. We would activate it as coming soon status. Then we would have pictures, switch to active. I always kind of put like what our team's gonna do to market the property, in the sub bullets, and then review offers. I'm personally a big fan of that strategy as long as it meets the client's needs. So if we can list the house on, we try to list on like a Thursday or Friday. If we can list on Thursday, Friday, keep it open through the weekend, and then review offers. I like to review offers on Monday just because I've been on the buying side a lot, and I understand that if your client's gone for the weekend and you want to try to get them out on a Monday, that's nice. And also it gives people time to lose on Sunday and then write a backup offer on Monday. So I'm a pretty big advocate of that method. You can scroll down. Thank you. Pricing, I do talk about what we talked about in pricing, and I'll talk about that here in just a bit. But this situation, they had listed with another agent, and they had listed it at $275, I believe. We knew that was too high because it was sitting on the market, so we knew we needed to go lower. Again, I'm a big advocate of listing at like quarters, just because as a buyer's agent, when I set buyer searches, I set them up at quarters, right? Like if it's 275, 300, 250, whatever. So that's, again, kind of the strategy that we go in at. And also knowing that this was a divorce situation, so we really needed to prioritize good terms too. Okay, remember that sheet that I just showed you guys where I write down like positives, negatives? This is exactly everything that I wrote down or took pictures of while we were there. So essentially, when it gets to this point, this is a lot less daunting and overwhelming because I already have the all the notes from my appointment, and it's already broken down exactly how I'm going to type it out. Same thing, sometimes this is really detailed, other times not so much. In this case, they wanted to do enough to like freshen up the house. They didn't really want to do anything like wild, so big focus on curb appeal. They had a bunch of like holes in the walls at the house, and then the house smelled like cats and dogs. It smelled terrible. So getting it professionally clean, also knowing that they're a divorce situation or tight on money, or do it yourself. And when they do it themselves, I like them to focus on baseboards, grout, vacuum and deep cleaning, and replacing air filters and cleaning vents to get rid of that smell. And then miscellaneous. This page generally stays pretty simple. PFB that I do. But when you bring like buyers into a house, right, then if someone has a binder of all the manuals and everything, doesn't that just that gives you like the warm fuzzies, right? It gives your buyers the warm fuzzies because you know that this house is well loved and taken care of. So I always tell people, hey, if you have like a copy of like the plats or the plans or any receipts or owner's manuals, let's put all of that in a binder and we'll leave it for the prospective buyers. When they come through the house, they can see that you really took care of this house. So I always ask people to do that, and they ask these questions anyway. So if you have it already, you're getting ahead of it and you're making your life a lot easier when it comes to listing. I always tell people to please look over the marketing packet. We have a marketing packet. We're going over a lot of information. So I'm gonna tell you, hey, I'm gonna come up with a strategy to get your house sold. As long as we're all in agreement, don't worry about the details, I'll take care of it, right? One less thing for you to worry about. And so I always do tell people like, hey, look over the marketing packet. Let me know if there's anything specific you want to take advantage of. Open houses, just listed postcards, all that kind of stuff. I always try to set the expectation of what will convey versus what will not convey, because we've all been on the buying side where you call the agent and they're like, oh, I don't know. I never want to give the client an answer or an agent the answer of I don't know. I want to have everything done before we get to that point. After we go under contract, I always just say, hey, we're going to order the wood destroyed insect, and then we always plan to close with MG law unless otherwise specified. So I always ask people like, hey, do you have your own lawyer? Great. If not, we'll use ours. Take care of it. One less thing for you to worry about. Make sure you have an extra set of the keys. If you've ever had a listing where it is a stupid automatic lock that goes dead on you during the listing, then you can give someone access to a combo box outside with an extra key. Again, just kind of saving you time and getting ahead of things. And then again, just covering ages of things. So you'll see how that kind of flows into my next step. And then any other major improvements. So just kind of highlighting some of the big ticket items. And then always including like helpful contacts. I always list this here, but also like they might have someone for that. So I always include like, hey, you have someone for this. If you need someone, let me know. Or I'll put them on a group text with the contractor so it's done. And just one less thing that they have to worry about and one less excuse that they can come up with. And then that's gonna be it for the PFB. So I typically email this to them. I will text it to them if they have iPhones, and then I'll also try to drop off a hard copy at their house as like a little pop by with like a handwritten thank you note. And just leave it on the porch for them. Do you guys have any questions on that? That was kind of a lot of info. All right, Ben, can you take me to the feature sheet? So everything that we just talked about, again, to give the buyers the warm fuzzies, I always try to put together a feature sheet, and I always say like our favorite features, and these are all the positives that I have from the PFB that I literally just copied and pasted, so it's not anything crazy. Again, what conveys with the house, this just saves you time, and it saves other agents' energies too, because everything is here. You don't, everything, there's no questions. It saves you phone calls and time that you can spend doing what you want. Safety features, this guy was big on safety, so we just really wanted to highlight those. But again, it gives you an opportunity to talk to the seller about what they think makes their house valuable. And ultimately what they think makes their house valuable probably makes it valuable to someone else too, so it's not gonna hurt. And then again, ages, like if I know the ages of the house, I always try to include that. Again, it just saves you questions from buyers agents. Okay, so ultimately all this stuff is copy and pasted from the PFB, and again, it's ad marketing and helps when you go to list. Okay, market updates. So when this is there you go, market updates. So let's say the client is a month or two away from listing. Each Wednesday morning we have a training at 6 a.m., which sounds crazy, but it's honestly like one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Because right after our training, I go straight into my market update. So it's 7 a.m., I don't have an excuse to not do it, and it's just done and out of the way. So basically what this is Ben, can you scroll down for me? So I have all of my like upcoming listings right here. And then can you click on photo for me?
This?
Yep, thank you. So, and then can you go to results? Thank you. Okay, so basically I have a saved search. So each week, if this was Magnolia Green, I would just have new listings in Magnolia Green that are resale, right? So every week I can send the client an update saying, hey, a house is coming soon, a house is active, 4 pended, and 2 have closed. None of them are great comps. But here's a link if you want to look through them. So that's typically what I do. And then if you can go to the follow-up box tab then. Each week I reply to the exact same email. one, I think this shows consistency, and two, it's easy for them to reference, like, hey, I'll put, hey, this house just went active, it's a pretty good comp for you guys, let's keep an eye on it. And again, this is just as much for me as it is for them, because then I can go back to my emails from 3 weeks ago and see, ooh, okay, this house should be closing, what's the situation? Maybe I call the agent and just be like, hey, you know, we were expecting that house to close, it's not, we have a long close because of X, Y, Z. And again, it just makes you look like you give a shit, honestly. That's what the key to all of this stuff is. It makes you look like you care, and you should.
Do you care if I click one of these, Maura?
No, go for it. So this was my like health savings plan. Like I got these guys set up with Will. So part of this too was like, hey, you want to keep an eye on what your house is looking like, but also we want to come up with a game plan for Will to make sure that we have a savings plan in place. And then that way too, I can keep them, accountable, right? Hey, how's your savings plan going? And I can just check in with that one once a month. If I don't have a reason to call, I can literally just say, hey, how are you doing on savings? And then, for example, they said, hey, we're actually having a baby. Oh my gosh, that's super exciting. Another reason to call, follow up, drop off a gift, whatever. But it just keeps you in front of them and also keeps you abreast of what their situation is. So, checking in, how are we doing? Over the last week, none of them were good comps. But if it is a good comp, then I'll typically link it. Ben, can you go to MLS for me really quick? And then can you just click on a listing? All right, so let's say that this house, and ironically, this actually was a pretty decent comp for them. I didn't know about this until recently, but if you click on the little square here,
This one?
and then just press share link, you can copy and paste this link, and it gives them a link directly to this listing, which I had no idea was a thing until like a couple months ago. So if you didn't know that was a thing, super easy way to send a listing to a client. Anyway, so I'll typically like include that in my market updates and say, we'll just keep an eye on this. Then when it closes, we can kind of talk about it, or we'll say, oh my gosh, that we're way over list, or didn't do too hot, maybe it's a little overpriced. And ultimately, when we get to listing, then we're in a great position and we have like a pretty good idea of what the comps already are. They know what the comps are, so we're just prepped, we're ready to roll. It's awesome. And then, so this is my markets updates. I do these every Wednesday until they list. Once they list, then we get their house sold the first weekend, that's the goal, and move on, and then we don't send this anymore.
Do you start at a certain time, like, a month out, 2 months out, 3 months out?
Great question, Dave. You guys are so good with the questions. We are teeing me up. I love it. I have this one client. Her name's Debbie, and Debbie has been. She is a widow, and she has been trying to get her house ready for the market for a little over a year. So we met a year ago. Debbie is the sweetest lady ever. Has gone through she's super emotional about it. Obviously, her house is also like a hoarder's house, right? Her kids are like, we need to get this thing gone, and she's like, slow your roll, please. Like, I need to clean out and go through everything. She has a lot of stuff to go through. So every week she still gets one of these, and I try to do check-in appointments with her every 4 to 6 months. And sometimes it's literally just a phone call, but I usually try to go into the house and just see, how are you doing? Can I connect you to contractors, which also helps. I'm in a 212 group, so it also helps me with my 212 group and get contractors in. It also just makes me look proactive and helps her, again, staying accountable. And then just checking in too. I care about her. I want her to sell her house. I want her to get into her next property, but I don't want it to be a traumatic experience, right? Her kids are like, we don't care. We just want her out. So then it's kind of playing that balance and also keeping the kids involved too and talking with them, checking in. And then we can kind of play off each other too, right? Like the kids and I can kind of hey, can you give her a little push here or here? And we can kind of work together to help mom get to her next house. So anyway, I do try to do that. And then yesterday I called Debbie just to check in. How are you doing? How are your updates coming? She called me back and then she had 3 leads for me. 3 leads. So I was like, okay, thanks Debbie, this is great. And I gotta follow up with her today. But anyway, so those check-in appointments are really helpful. So even if it is a year out, that's fine. And I told her, I said, hey, how are your market updates? Do you like those every week? And she's like, can we just bump it to once a month? Sure, happy to do that. So now she's gonna get them once a month. But it still is keeping it fresh. She's on all my monthly emails and stuff like that. And then that's pretty much it. One thing I didn't touch on too much is once we go under contract, I do have an email template in my follow-up box, but it's gonna be kind of annoying. Actually, it's gonna be annoying to get to, but basically I just say, when the EMD's due, when the inspection is scheduled, when the appraisal, we should have it back roughly, just to kind of give the sellers peace of mind for that everything's taken once a week just to say, hey, this is where we are. Or if we get great news, I try to call them or text them on that. And then Justin kind of again handles a lot of the back end stuff with just writing insect reports and making sure everything's together from all parties and things like that. So that's kind of my process. A lot of prep work. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah.
Who wouldn't list with Maura?
Yeah, I would.
That's the goal. Thanks for having me.
Maura, you talked a little bit about like hating and shadowing, and if you weren't on a team, how do you?
I would have failed. I would have been out of business like a month later. I mean,
Do you have
seriously.
any ideas for those who may not be on a team?
Join a team.
Okay.
Join a team. Find a mentor too, like, and someone who's gonna like love on you and want you to succeed. I think that has been like one thing I love about our team, and it has become so helpful. Is I was complaining to them probably about how I was driving around with buyers on weekend and I'm tired and I don't want to do this anymore. And he goes, well, then become a listing agent. Like, what do we need to do to get you to be a listing agent? Like, start asking for listings. And then I was like, well, I just don't feel confident in them. Like I said, my buyer, I'm confident. Like, I know what I'm doing. My seller just, I just don't feel confident. He's like, well, then get confident. Like, get educated and get confident. Start working on it more. So that's what we do. And
Seem
now I
pretty
find that
confident now.
I have a pretty good system. What'd you say?
Seem pretty confident now.
Yeah, I feel pretty good. Better, work in progress. Cool. Well,
Guys.
okay. Oh.
I'm sorry, you have a question?
Do y'all do that? Do y'all do that on all your listing appointments? Does somebody go? Y'all tag team all the listing appointments?
Not all of them.
Like,
Like,
when do you think you're gonna want to go by yourself?
so no, I mean I do go on like if this sounds again terrible, but I'm playing on emotions, knowing that that's one of my strong suits is if I know I'm getting a divorced woman who is heartbroken about her divorce, I'm probably not taking Kevin, Ben, or Justin. I will probably, if anyone, be taking Caitlin, but like sometimes you just handle yourself too. So yeah.
So it's situational.
Every situation is like it's not one size fits all, it's one size fits one. So that's the way I like to look at it.
I like having someone with me just to kind of take notes. Much better talking, engaging, making eye contact, things like that, and I don't write a bunch of stuff down. I hear it, talking about it, and then like I said, I leave, I got 37 text messages and on to the next appointment. So it's nice having Maura, Justin, somebody else there to help kind of fill in the blanks and make sure it's all recorded somewhere outside.
Well, there's a certain, I guess, first of all, you kind of get the two for the price of one. Like for the client, that's good that you get two sets of eyes on it, but also there's something called there's a show off factor, right? So like if I'm with Maura, and Maura's going to naturally perform better, not because it's me, but because there's somebody else watching her. You want to perform and you want to do well. And there's a factor involved there. So I think that a lot of people that are on teams, everybody's getting paid the same no matter what. You might as well ask for the help and bring it with you, because it's likely going to make, of course, there's situationals, like, the divorced woman completely understand. But generally speaking, bring somebody with you.
Especially when you're new, maybe not that confident. Like, sometimes I ask questions and I'm still like, I don't know. Then I say it much nicer than that, but that's my initial reaction. I'm like, oh, Ben, what do you think about that? And let him answer the question, right? And it still makes us look like a good team. We got a good system going. Again, it's not for every situation, but it works well for a lot of them. And bringing Justin too, like he'll do like measurements while we're at the house too, like just makes you look like you got your life together, which is good. You want to have our lives together.
Guys, outside of price always the most important, best form of marketing, all that stuff. But other than that, it's just setting the correct expectations. The goal when a buyer goes in the house for you as the listing agent is for them to walk out and say yes or no without having hundreds and hundreds of questions. To be an effective listing agent, you have to be a good leader. You can tell that Maura's a great leader. She carries herself well. She speaks well. But you also have to be insanely organized. Like, look at all the crap she's got on there, but it's all put together. Like, that's really important to be an effective listing agent. You got to want to be like that, and it's not for everybody, and it's hard work. But once you get to a certain point, you can be extremely effective with just a little bit of organization.
And putting systems in place. I mean, like if you saw me a year ago, I was not this put together. We were working on it, but I was not there. But now I have systems in place, and again, shadowing people, like going on those appointments with Kevin, like it's just as helpful for him as it is for me. Like just taking notes, listening to his talk tracks, great. Same thing, Ben, Caitlin, like, and they all have different styles, and it's cool too, because if you're walking into a situation and you're like, oh, this person would probably get along really well with Ben, or this person would get along really well with Caitlin, that's the agent I'm going to try to tag team it with. So, it's super helpful. So, anyway, if you guys have questions, please let me know. I hope you guys don't mind that I'm getting out here a little early.
Oh, yeah.
I hope you guys go sell a house today. I'm not coming.
There you go, Blue!